In this video, I want to talk to you guys about core power and actual rotational speed. Max Wardell, overheadathletics.com. There's a lot of people out there using things like this, different types of implements, throwing, pushing, and these are great exercises. We got to consider what allows the athlete to rotate at their greatest possible speed. Is it throwing these faster and faster? Well, I have a weighted implement here. That is actually going to slow me down my maximal rotational speed. So if an athlete needs more strength, more power, maybe I use the ball. If we're talking about speed, we got to develop a few things. Number one is the ability to contract the core musculature isometrically and at the same time. We call it co-contraction, which basically means all the muscles around the entire core, this circumferential muscular sheath, if you will, has to contract all at once to allow for the most stability of the spine, and that allows for lengthening of the tendinous structures, the fascial structures that actually allow for an elastic recoil. So we could dive deep into that, or we can actually hop over and talk about some different exercises that we can do to try to activate the core all at once. And if you haven't yet, go back to check out our advanced core strengthening exercise where we go through some stuff where the band's moving, we got to contract the core, and those are really good to use anti-rotation exercise, but we actually have some exercises that'll force you to contract the core as you go through an excursion. And then we have some exercises where we have to explode through the core without a preload, which is how we do a lot of our med ball throws for guys that need that ability to contract their core really quick. Ultimately, however, the most effective speed training for the core or for rotational events is that event itself. For throwers, we want to use throwing because that's the most specific event. Let's go into a couple exercises we use with a lot of athletes here at the Overhead Athletic Institute. So exercise number one, we use this in our corrective exercise program. We use this with a lot of college athletes, a lot of high school athletes, and even our youth athletes, but we have a progression. So exercise number one in this progression, to get an athlete to contract his core throughout a full excursion through the thoracic spine and through the core, is actually a chop. So you can see Austin set up nicely here, palms face each other, outside hand on top. We would do this bilaterally. He's got a reach where he's reaching forward through his serratus, but he's not leaning through his trunk. He's actually lined up perfectly, and all of the rotation is going to happen through here, none through the hips themselves. And then he's going to chop down and reach towards my hand. As he goes down, you see points the fingers. He's going to hold there. If he can rotate farther through his chest, he'll go to there. As a coach, I'll get him to rotate a little farther with a little active assisted motion there, and then have him hold it at the end range, and then back to the start. If you can hold 10 seconds on these, you're a beast. We're gonna do typically 5-second holds with athletes. Go ahead and go again. You see how he rotates through the spine as a unit. He does not rotate the pelvis to go. He goes through thoracic spine right here. And what happens in athletic events? They're diagonal patterns where you do a chop and a lift. In a throw and something like this, we always chop to the closed side, which is different than what you see in a lot of the SFMA style exercises where you see a chop to open space to this back hip. So you could do both ways. We see that this is more functional and sport specific for our throwing athletes, so we go to this leg up. Now, of course, you can do lifts, but we'll have Austin do here is he's going to stand up. We focus primarily on the anterior aspect of the core with the obliques, which of course wrap around. Now we're going to focus more on resisting flexion of the spine. So he's going to go into a split stance, up onto the back heel, straighten through the front leg, right there. He's going to pull back, straighten that back knee out for me, Austin, right there, perfect. Good posture. Tight core, nice little neutral spine here in the lumbar spine. You see he's got this good hold. From there, he's going to rotate through his spine and rotate one shoulder this way. The hands, arms stay with the chest. He holds there and rotates the other way. So now you're focusing more on the posterior aspect of even the obliques, which we, of course, wrap all the way around, but because he has to also resist a flexion moment of the spine, he has to focus more on the posterior musculature. So he's working multifidi, he's working the rotators, he's working all of the lumbar paraspinals at the same time that he trains the obliques and even the rectus abdominis to resist pulling him into an anterior tilt this way. So a lot of talk there. Basically what we're doing is you want to focus more on the posterior aspect of the spine at the same time that you work the muscles that control the shoulder blade. You do it in this fashion. Look, Austin's fatiguing very quickly. That tells you how difficult the exercise is. So when he loses technique, right there's a side bend, we just say, okay, we're done with the rep. And then he'll come out of it, recover, and go back into it. Now someone like Austin who teaches these, he could do this exercise for even a longer period of time with a heavier band. For the purpose of the video, you can see that, oh, I get this little bit of this moment happening. Maybe I lose my thoracic extension and all of a sudden the exercise is done. So when I can't maintain proper posture, proper core contraction and co-contraction through the core, the exercise is over. Now we're going to hop over to where we actually teach you to activate the gluteal muscles at the same time that you have to co-contract the core, because if you can't work into hip extension and alternatively hip flexion on the opposite side while you have contraction of the core, you're not going to be very athletic, because we know that these things happen in sports. One leg's in front of the other. Maybe I'm even split stance in sports this way, or maybe I'm bilateral stance wide. I have to be able to contract the core in all those different positions, and that's what you'll see here on this exercise. So now what we have is another exercise we kind of use in our corrective exercise program in a way. We have Austin laying longitudinally on the foam roll, where it's from the cranium down to the sacrum, covering the entire spine. He's lined up nicely. What he's going to do here is the hands come up, and you'll see how difficult this is in 1 second. He's going to come here, get his feet nice and close together. Bring your feet together for me, Austin. One leg is going to go up. I'll let him choose which side he wants to do. To the sky. And all of a sudden, this exercise becomes very difficult. So if he has to, he'll use his hands to start. If he can, he'll do it without the hands. He's going to bring this leg up as high as he can, and he's going to push through the glute with no extension of the spine. So what I have Austin do here is balance just a little bit through the hands. Once he's done a few repetitions, we'll let him lift those hands up. And he's got to push all the way to hip extension. Once again, as a coach, you assist them if they need it to get to that terminal end range. Bam, there's that end range. Very, very difficult to control that. The foam roll wants to go side to side. What do I have to do? I have to contract my obliques on both sides. I have to contract my transversus abdominis, suck everything in. My rectus abdominis, glutes have to contract really hard. Hip flexor on this side. It makes it very difficult just to do a bridge on the flat ground and actually lift one leg, because the hamstring wants to pull you into a posterior tilt at the same time that you have your glute contracting really hard on the opposite side and your iliopsoas contracting really hard to hold that up. There's a lot of forces acting on the spine, which is very, very functional, and actually relatively low shear loads on the spine. So bridging is something we do with a lot of our spine patients and hip patients. Now try to give me a rep or two with no hand support and see if you can just maintain it. Keep your hands out there, perfect. He'll keep his hands within touch to the ground, and sometimes in our corrective exercise program we actually use another SFMA band where he has to do an active Y at the same time. Now from there he's going to try to bridge. That's how hard it should be. If it's easy to do the bridge, you're telling yourself you're not doing it right. Here it should be that hard to where you can barely complete a repetition properly. If you can hold it at the end for 5 seconds, that'll tell you you're working very hard and you're doing something that's very, very intense on the core and the glute. As little touch as possible. You get less and less as you go. Very good. That was his best rep right there. So those are the exercises to start with to try to teach the core to move through range of motion, co-contract with the glutes, move through a full excursion, and actually have contraction all the way around the spine, all the way around the core, and through the lower extremities. Very functional. What needs to happen in athletic events, and you also have to have the anti-rotation capacity, which we talked about in our last video, so make sure to check that out, advanced core training exercises, where we actually do a lot of anti-rotation stuff and try to utilize different implements and different inertial loads to train the core. So we use both of these in our programming, as well as some exercises that are frankly even more advanced than this. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and we'll see you guys in the next video.